Trace FM 95.3. I've got with me James Smart, and we're talking about everything journalistic in every way. I see this on social media a lot, right? And social media is a kind of a representation of what people are thinking on, in the country. And I see people say, the news gives me a headache. It gives me stress. I don't watch the news. Whenever I talk to these young guys out here, it's like one of those things where people say, I don't go to town. It's a competing factor with, I don't watch the news. You get?
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel as someone who dedicates their life towards reporting things that are happening, and then you're hearing and seeing these people say, so they don't appreciate your work, essentially.
So I totally understand. Sometimes I think watching the news is like, sort of logging into a Netflix series that is on season 301, episode 5010. And you're wondering, where do I start? Who are these main characters?
The bold and the ugly.
What's the plot? Yeah. So I understand that. I understand the confusion that we all just cannot care about everything that happens all the time. All of us. That is perfectly fine, and that's okay. What I think we need to do mostly is to think about how to make, and I think this is an onus on journalists and journalism itself and journalism students who are going to take up part of this thing. Is the job is actually on ourselves to make the most important thing interesting, and not to interest the public, because interesting the public is the clickbait stuff. All right, it is the headless child who's walking in Makueni. All right, and everyone will click on it, because it's a fantastical story that has not happened, or it's clickbait stuff. But there's a place and space for good quality storytelling that can include all of us. So I think the honors is still on us as journalists, as people who are in this business, and as journalism student people who are going to come up and take up this space to figure out how to be more interesting in storytelling. And I think that is something that we can do and must do. I'll say, for instance, the protest story last month when it was happening, it's an important story, and everyone could not access the CBD, or there was some sort of a sense of panic in the country. And we had to figure out better ways on how to tell that story and make it interesting. And those things would be perhaps to go live on TikTok as opposed to go live on TV. There are things that we can do, like the interesting things that you do, on Instagram, the reels and those things. Those things as a platform help us to show people that, we're not just trying to interest you, but this is an interesting thing that you can find it in the format that you like. If you have attention for 15 seconds, it's possible for us to tell you this story
to achieve
in
that.
15 seconds. So that is one part of it. I think as a people, as Kenyans, and maybe just as Africans in general, the idea of things that happen to us and we can effect change has never been a serious thing, an important thing. So in this sense, that our forefathers or our great-grandparents inherited, colonialism in a way that they were being told what to do. Okay? And
a bit of sprinkle of neocolonialism.
Yes. And for the longest time, if your education system is the teacher comes and says things, and you have to sort of raise your hand for you to have a point, and half of the time they really are not interested in your point of view. And so I understand that we're not built to sort of offer ourselves and question the system for real. But I think with the new space that we're in, where we have social media and we can see how things go elsewhere, it's possible for us to question things as a people and start thinking, like, why would the whole city of Nairobi today not have garbage bins? What's with that? So we don't need, the person who's in charge of the capital city to be going out and doing charity, but to be fixing the structures and the system. All right. If you go to Nairobi today and find a homeless person, and I show up as an MP or senator or governor and say, I found this kid, and I was really,
I want to provide this and that.
I'm gonna pay for his school fees until he goes to university. You understand? And the problem with that is, where there was one, there was two, there's 10, there was 50, there's 100. That person came from somewhere. There's a systemic failure with the system. As someone who's in charge of the system, we don't want you to do charity. We want you just to fix the
solutions.
System. You understand? And I see that's where I think we should be more. Okay, in how do we make sure that this openness that we have, the younger people and the openness on social media helps us to tell these people, fix the system. It's fine, you can do whatever you want to do with your money, your private money, but these are taxes. This is money that it's not your money.
Essentially supposed to be used for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that for me is a much more bigger space and important space for how younger people with much more opportunity, with opportunities on being on social media to use it in a much better way. So that we fix this country for all of us. This country belongs to all of us. And from my experience, being in this business for a while, I don't think Kenya needs anything else. Kenya has everything it needs. All right. It has the most talented people. It has, facts and things that work for us. If it is, in arts, if it's in business, if it's in education, if it's in healthcare, we have the best. But what Kenya misses is,
when you say healthcare, that's a can of worms.
No, it is. It's in terms of the people we train are essentially the best in the world. This is why they go to the UK, or to Australia, or to the US, and get the jobs as nurses and doctors and all those things. They're the best, right? It's our systems that fail. And our systems fail because our political class has put us in a position where we are spectators of what's happening to all of us. So they do things and then we all watch, and then you're like, where they can do this.
I love how you put it, spectators, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, we're buying a ticket with our taxes to watch
ourselves, being done bad things by the politicians.
Now, as we get into press freedom, I don't want to do this interview in a very traditional way. I want to. What is the first year when? What year was it? 2000 and what? When you got into the business?
So I got into the business 2008.
2008, right?
Yes.
Right after the post-election and everything that unfolded, right?
Yeah.
I want you to answer this in two ways, right? Press freedom then and press freedom now.
Right. So I think the biggest enemy or the biggest threat to journalism is always people in authority, people in government who are interested in making sure that things are not printed or not published.
Yes.
And so in many ways they do things to journalists, individual journalists, and people get arrested, incarcerated for long periods of time, get disappeared and get killed. And that has happened in this country and continues to happen. Obviously other countries and other, places would have, much worse cases, but still, being stopped from doing what is sort of like a public duty shouldn't happen. So that has happened a lot and continues to happen. What I think has happened today, as opposed to 2008, is there is more, sort of this big government or people in authority figuring out means and ways on how to stop people from working online, making sure that they threaten individual journalists on Twitter, on Facebook, and that sort of thing. They find means and ways on how to trail journalists and make it almost impossible for someone to fear about their lives. But most importantly, in many cases, what has happened for the last 10 or so years is people in authority and government have found means and ways on how to sort of remove journalists from newsrooms.
Yes.
And essentially making them lose their jobs.
Wow.
And that way then becomes sort of like a signal, like, we did this to this guy, we can do it to you. And so that makes journalists fearful. And it has an impact on how collectively, as journalists, to do stories. Because you're like, wait, should I think about my rent today or should I think about Kenya today?
Yeah.
And the choices are very simple. When you make someone to think about that. So I think those things happen a long time. And in a civil society that we're in, we would hope that our democracy allows competing ideas.
Mature enough.
Yes, that it's possible for us to disagree, vehemently, and then walk away and be like, that was fine. It was a good conversation. I did manage to convince you today, but
we can try again.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. There are certain things we can agree on. Like we all like safety, we all like security. We all want to live in this country. We all want to, wake up the next day and see if we can progress. We can agree on those things, but to disagree on how this country moves forward. Okay, and that should be fine. But at the moment, I think how we disagree with people becomes like, we've disagreed on this and it's a fundamental disagreement. So either I need to figure out how to make sure that you lose this and feel personally you've lost it, or make sure that me and everyone else look at you as an enemy moving forward. And I think that's a key problem with journalism today and public discourse, that what we disagree on in public, we've made it to be so personal, as opposed to it's a difference of opinion. You know, we could have, and let's have it as often as possible. At the moment, I think it's a bit of a place that is that doesn't work.
Now, you as a very well-seasoned journalist, I read your article the other day. Very well written. I haven't seen you write in a while. Actually, I have. Before that, you'd written about the podcast, right?
Yeah.
But I digress. I mean, you're interviewing the president, you interview presidents, all of this different kind of thing. You, a guy who's seasoned, you know, well marinated and all of that. Have you gotten threats?
Threats happen all the time. It comes with the business. Like
No. You know, this is. I want an in-depth.
Yes.
I don't want that whole.
No.
Sijui, you know, walking around.
Yes, of course. I've got
like
threats.
serious threats.
It's happened. It happens. This week when you're doing a new story, or someone says like, we know you're the one who's directing this to happen. We know it. You know, we are watching you. It happens. All right. So I'm not saying, you know, and these threats, it's the funny thing about the threats today is it coming from former colleagues. All right.
Hold up.
Who
former
former colleagues.
This is interesting.
Who would sit back and be like, oh, you know, you guys are, you know, you guys in the media, and then nowadays they like calling us you guys in the media.
Yeah.
You know, and this is a folk who was, you know, just the other day.
Member of the Fourth Estate.
Yes. And so they've transitioned now and understand that their job right now is to handle the politician and take care of the interest and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And there's no issue with that. It's career development, career advancement, and we all choose, you know, what happens to all of us. But in the moments public discourse becomes, you know, this argument, for instance, like, you know, the protests and the mandabanos and whatnot, the conversations that we're getting from our former colleagues mostly was more threats. It was more like, you know, we will shut you down. It's like, you'll shut who down? Why? On what? Okay? That is, why you guys doing this? You know, why you guys giving these guys too much airtime, blah, blah, blah. You know, you guys are lying. Have you guys told the side of the police and what those things? And so my response personally to at least two who texted and called me was that, one, I think we're dealing with two different audiences. Your audience is your boss.
Yes.
Who's the politician, all right? My audience is the general public.
50 million.
And so your idea of trying to put us to be like we are competing is not true. It's actually false, okay? You have a point of view. I don't. I will cover what's happening as it happens the whole day and the entire time. And respectfully, I disagree with your point of view.
Now, I like that you've said that, right? And we've seen cases, accusations of the media being biased, right?
Right.
To some extent, a big chunk of the media in Kenya is private, right?
Yeah.
And of course, me as a private individual who runs a business, I probably have interest, and many people do. So would you say that freedom of press in Kenya has been, it's not attainable, essentially?
No. I think two things we need to separate from this question. The media business itself, which is generally private. I think 99.9% of media
in Kenya
is private, right? It means it has private interests. It's someone who has figured out that they can do business in this space, okay? Over and above that, they're given an additional responsibility, which is how do we make sure that you also, because you have this public utility, because the airwaves is a public utility, then you do some public good. And the public good then is journalism, the thing that lives inside the media business, right? So the news, the features, and whatever that comes with it. Now, the question of this thing becoming biased is based on this fact that, number one, it's a business, all right? And then the person who owns the business then has an upper hand and can decide what is covered, when it's covered, and that sort of thing. So it has a problem in this sense that obviously the person who's paying, you know, your salary decides many things. But in journalism, they don't tell us, they don't sit in our newsroom meetings and tell us what to do. There's a proper, what we call it, a separation of church and state, okay?
Is it?
It happens. It happens. I'll explain that. So while the person who owns the business is doing business and is dealing with a public utility, which is the airwaves here, and it's being granted by the state, the government. If the government thought that this place does not work as a public utility, yes, they'll close it down. But because they imagine that Calvin is doing some important things for the public, Calvin is educating, as he entertains and he make money, it's fine. So Calvin can do all these things and they're not, in competition at the same time. The issue that I have, and I'd agree with, is that I would not, it will be wrong, I think, for me to sit here and say that we've not failed, maybe in coverage and giving maybe one side a bit more than the other. I think that is proven, and I think that we can do better.
Yes.
For sure. There's been many instances where journalists themselves have been induced.
Continues.
Yes, and continues to be induced.
Yeah.
And the best way to fix that is not less journalism, is more journalism, all right? Is for us to figure out means and ways on how we open up this space so that we have more investigative journalists, for instance, okay, as opposed to less. It's for us to figure out how do we make sure that we don't overcover politicians, because today news is politics, and that could explain why people are tuning off, and to cover more of what's happening with the people, all right, as opposed to the politicians. We cover those who are governed more than those who do the governing. And when that happens, then the question of bias essentially disappears, because our job should be explaining to people what's happening to them, not what the person who's governing them is doing today. All right? And in many ways, that I think is the disconnect. So the question of if we are biased and if a tell of it all, then we should be closed down, is a defeatist mentality. It doesn't help anyone go anywhere. It doesn't advance.
I feel like if we say shut down, it's a band-aid solution.
Yeah, but that's what they want, essentially. That's what they would want.
It's essentially, yes, there have been those threats. We've seen them over years. It's not the first time, right? But, I like what you've said, and now leads me on to my other point, right? On social media nowadays, everyone's become a journalist. Literally, if I've got a camera and I have, the smallest in editing skills, I can record, like, for instance, yesterday I saw the video of the truck that was being burnt on the Southern Bypass, and everybody already asking the truck driver what and what. And guys don't understand media ethics. The common mwananchi out on the, they don't. And boom, you change the narrative of what something is, and by the time it's been sent on WhatsApp and everywhere, by the time you're reporting it at 7 p.m,
it's gone.
There's no way I'm changing the narrative.
It's gone. So I think this way, for instance, like yesterday, there's two important stories, or maybe three, that will take time to be covered, and that's journalism is not breaking news, is not being there when things are happening. It is the thing that happens after the things are right. So there's a truck that was banned and matatu that was banned. Those are two important things. Number one, what is happening currently in many newsrooms is figuring out this matatu, who owned it, what's the plate number, where was it coming from, who was there, do we have any pictures, any videos, and that sort of thing, because that helps us a lot to understand what happened to this thing before. And then number two, these places happen in the middle of the road, so there has to be cameras. All right, they are cameras. Yes. So it's for authorities then to provide us this footage that shows us these are the people who are main suspects. We see them coming from this street, blah blah blah, closing the street and then burning down this thing. And then you can have facial recognition and be able to tell you these are the people who did this. They came from this place and that place and that place. Pretty much the same way the story of the sheep from Huru's farm had to take time for it to put the people who
literally stolen them.
And that's the journalism. All right, the journalism is not saying sheep is being stolen. These are the footage of people being sheep.
But you realize you and I were the professionals, went to school and studied all of that. It's beautiful, it's romantic. But with social media, it's about who broke the news. It's like enough times I see something was said about someone and everyone is casting stone on them. No one takes time to apologize. Big media, you're told, okay, NMG, you guys have to run an apology for something like that. All the time.
And when you get it wrong, I think the only right thing to do is to apologize. Yes. And we should do that more often, because journalism, as you make your point, is, so I say this, I think doctors bury their mistakes every day. All right?
Unfortunately.
Journalists publish their mistakes every single day. So we should have a space where we can apologize and we can get it wrong. And I think that is the thing that perhaps we don't appreciate, understand a bit more, that we're not saying that journalists cannot get it wrong. We think that journalists should publish what is right with the information they have at the right time and the best of time with the best of intentions. When they get it wrong, we also hope that journalists will come and say, hey, we thought Calvin works for Trace. We found that he doesn't work for Trace. And our information at that time of going to publish was wrong, and we apologize profusely. And we move on, all right? We can't just go back and say, no. You see, Calvin also worked for Trace at the time. No, we just have to apologize and correct the record and move on. So to your point, I think about social media and breaking news and it being fast, that journalism will never win against social media.
Hands down.
It will never. Because social media goes to, it acts on your dopamine of knowing things now, right? And because we need to counter-check many things, we'll not be able to, fulfill that. Because, and unfortunately then it's lies and all these things that, would come through that comes social media for all it takes. The thing I think that journalism does, while that lie that takes the lifts and gets up to 19th floor, and before the truth,
is on the stairs. By the time it gets up, it's true, we cannot fix that part. In our own experience, I'll give our own experience. During the pandemic, two things were happening. People were sending videos that were from other places. For instance, MP Babowino shared a video of something that happened in Jacaranda, on the day. And it had massive engagement, hundreds of thousands of views. And everyone was like, oh my God, this is happening and whatnot. It took us 18 hours to find the exact source of that video, which was somewhere in Congo. Something that happened in 2014, 2015. Wow.
And we put that out. And he had to be forced to withdraw and apologize. But social media had gone with it before. DCI, the next day went and put pictures of, these are the people who yesterday were causing all this matter of chaos. And it was lies. These were pictures that were picked from all protests from 2007. It took us another 15, 16 hours to find the exact source of these pictures and publish and say, hey guys, you think that these pictures you put are perhaps not true.
Yeah.
And they had to apologize. So for us, journalism is not about breaking news. And it should never be about breaking news. I think everyone who's in this business should be, how do I make sure that I actually tell the truth? Whether it takes 18 hours or 24 hours, or 30 days later, the truth has to be told.
Well, that sounds like a hard job for the newsroom.
It is.
Because from an advertising background, right, they tell you if we had the metrics for the data for WhatsApp, hey,
it will be chaos.
It's a powerful media source.
It is. We have to figure out how to fix WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is the place where
everything.
Your auntie shows up with, oh, have you seen this? This and so is dead, and you're like, oh God, this is not true. My old man the other day, literally on Sunday, he told us, we're chilling, and he said, Celine Dion is dead. And you're like, wait, what do you mean? He's like, I saw it online. Like someone sent it to me and we checked. It's a Yahoo thing.
Wow.
And he's like, wait, can someone actually lie about this thing?
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, not everything you see online is
true.
Yeah. But so while these things happen, there's nothing much we can do in fixing how we're trying to mediate with social media. And social media is how we're trying to communicate with each other. We can't do so much about that, which is the platforms. What we can do much better as professionals is to make sure that...
fact check.
Yes, and build it back into our streams. So the stuff about what happens today that has gone and you've perhaps seen it in passing and perhaps engaged in it online, tomorrow someone should be able to bring another footage that says, the thing that we saw yesterday is not exactly as it is, and sometimes not exactly false. Sometimes it's just some facts have been, fiddled around to fit a certain end. And we have to have a bit of more appetite for the truth as a people, not as anyone else. Like the same way we engage with new information, the same way we should engage with this other thing that comes that sort of challenges what we think.
What we'd already been.
Yeah, was the truth.
Now, as we conclude, right? So we've gotten to this point. Threats, social media, world over, there's journalists in captivity.
Yeah.
We saw what happened to Khashoggi and that story, Kanyagiliwad and all of that, right? I talk to young kids and they say, when they tell their parents they want to be journalists, they're told, don't do that, right?
No.
So for you, who's a person who's in this trade, has been in this trade, and you continue to be a guy who's advanced in the trade, what would you say is next for press freedom?
I think journalism will always be important. It will survive, this year, 10 years, and 100 years from now, if we were to wake up from where we'd be. I think there's a human need to explain to all of us what's happening to all of us at different times. All right. Today, it might not seem important in my life because possibly my parents pay for everything that I do. They pay for my rent, they pay for my car, my house, whatever it is. But at some point, you'd have to negotiate yourself in this world alone.
Yeah.
And you somewhat going to need to figure out what is this series that is on season 3000, episode 5010. You have to find your plot, you have to find your main characters, and you have to make sense, because at that point, this is the information that will allow you as a human being, a rational, functional human being, to make sense of the world. All right. None of us go through this world without engaging with the things that matter for us. So journalism will always exist. The place and space for storytellers, I'd like to remove the word journalist, will always be there. And those storytellers, whether they tell us stories about, crime, about, opportunities, whether they tell stories about lifestyle or art, whether they tell stories that are light or hard, those stories are important for us, because the only reason we are human beings, the only reason we're not animals, is because human beings exchange stories. We tell each other stories, and that's how we grow, and that's how we make advancement. So if this society is going to be a society that is of note moving forward, we'd have to tell each other stories. And I hope those stories are great stories that we can engage in and make sense of the world.